Dear respected children, good morning. This morning, today is our last day. Not exactly, tomorrow will be our last day. But today is the last day that you'll be listening to a story. And I'd like to share a story with you. It's actually a dream I had. And it's real. I didn't make it up. So it was a dream when I was about maybe, in the dream I was about maybe your age. How old are you now?
I'm turning 9 in a few days.
You'll be turning 9 in a few days. So I was about 9. I was about 9 years old. And I went up this mountain, beautiful mountain, very high mountain with a lot of trees and beautiful boulders. A lot of wild animals too. And I went on this mountain, there's a temple. It's a house actually, and it's empty. No one lives there. And it's perched really high on the mountaintop. And so I went in there and I found there were so many other people coming into this mountain, this temple. And everyone was really curious. They wanted to know what's inside this temple. Why is it so beautiful and no one is living there? So they went in and they were trying to discover, looking around. And then someone wanted to leave. Someone wanted to go out of this temple. And he couldn't. He couldn't go out of it. He got stuck in the temple, even though there was no wall, even though he was in the courtyard, even though I was there and I was outside. I wasn't actually inside the house. I was outside in the yard. And a lot of other people were outside looking at the temple, looking at this house up there. And yet we couldn't leave. There was some kind of, it was like there was an invisible wall or something like that. An invisible force that prevent us from coming out. We were like all stuck, like it was like like a glass door. Have you ever come across a glass door? And there's so much glass that you don't know whether this is really a glass door or it's just air.
I walked into one once.
Exactly. It was like that. It was like that. Sometimes the birds, they flew into a glass door and they didn't think that there's a glass there and they hit themselves really, really badly. Well, it was like that. It was so, this temple was in some kind of spell. And people couldn't leave. People couldn't leave this place. And everyone got really scared and really panicked. So everyone was running around, trying to find a clue to break this spell. And they were looking through everything, all the shelves, all the tables. But they couldn't find a clue to break this spell, to get out of this place. And they were all stuck, and everyone was panicked, and everyone got really scared. And then I was there, and I was watching everybody, and I was really scared too. Because I felt, oh no, what am I going to do? Because I wouldn't get to see my family anymore. And I get stuck here on top of the mountain in this empty temple, empty place, with all these strangers around me. And I was really, really scared. And I panicked. Everyone was panicking. And then I decided just to sit down. I decided to sit down. And you know what I did when I sat down? Anybody?
You meditated.
I meditated. Who else? What do you think I do when I sit down? Anybody? Anyone else?
How old are you?
I was 9. You mean now? I'm 9. And I breathe, that's it. I sat down and I breathed because everyone was so scared and so panicking, and I was really scared and panicking also. So I decided to sit down and breathe. And then I sat down really, really beautifully. Show me how to sit beautifully. Thank you. You can't do the, but this is good enough. Pat, tell me how you sit beautifully. Sit upright beautifully. Thank you. How about you, Nero? You want to sit beautifully? Show us how to sit beautifully. Thank you. So I sat beautifully like Nero right now. And I breathe and I breathe and I breathe really hard because I didn't know what else to do. So I breathe and I breathe. And then, do you know what I found? Anybody guess what I found?
The barrier goes away. If you meditate, the barrier goes away.
You're smart. So when I breathe and I breathe, the barrier went away. Anyone else?
But was it only you could go out? Or everyone could get out?
So your question is it just me that can get out or everyone? Well, I breathe and I breathe really hard, and then I found inside myself, I found a key to get out of it. And I realized that the way to get out of this invisible force field that keeps me inside and everyone inside was to go in here and to breathe. And I found that's how I can get out, and I was able to get out. And if everybody can sit down and breathe like that, they can also find a way to get out as well. So what I learned from this story, this dream, is that when we're agitated, when we are angry, when we are upset, when we are sad, when we are lonely, the way to come out of it is to breathe, to sit down really still and to breathe. Because it doesn't feel very good, right? It doesn't feel very good when we are upset and sad and lonely. So we want to get out of it. And the way to get out of it is to sit really still and to breathe with it. And to breathe with it. So next time when you're upset, or when mommy and daddy are upset about something or about you, or when you're scared, or when you're sad, just sit down. Just sit down and breathe. And then you will see that this sadness, this agitation, and this anger, it melts away. And you're free. You're free from it. Just like in my dream, I was free. I was able to break through this invisible wall that had kept me in. I was able to be free and come out of it. So thank you, children, for coming up here and for supporting me to tell this story. Thank you. So why don't we listen to one sound of the bell and breathe with it? Breathe 3 times. Adam will invite the little sound of the bell for us to stand up, for the children to stand up, and then we turn to our parents and we bow with another sound of the bell before we leave, okay? So let's listen to one big sound of the bell. To breathe to sit really still to sit really still, like I did in that dream, to sit really still and really calm, and to breathe. Dear respected Thai, dear Sangha, today is the 2nd of August, 2018, and we are on the last talk of the summer retreat, and we are in the upper hamlet in the Stillwater Hall. And this week we talked about powers, the 3 different powers. So we've started out with the power of love, the power of cutting through afflictions. And today we're going to talk about the power of understanding. And this week we've learned in everything we did how to cultivate mindfulness, concentration, and insight. And we know that mindfulness, concentration, and insight are energies that are in us. They are there in the form of seeds in the depths of our consciousness. And what we've learned and what we've practiced in the last week was to help these seeds to manifest in our mind consciousness. Because when these seeds manifest, they bring peace, well-being. They bring happiness and clarity. And so mindfulness is being present for what is unfolding, whatever it is, whether it's something that's wholesome or not wholesome. And we're there for it. We're focused on that experience, whatever it is that we're looking at. And that's called concentration. And when we are present and concentrated, focused at what we're looking at, then we see. We have clarity. We see deeply into it. We see causes and conditions that had brought about this experience. And that's called insight. It's called understanding. So mindfulness, concentration, and insight are already in us. So we don't need to find it outside of us. What we need are tools, are ways to practice in order to tap into them. And we need a community of practice to support us with that, because everyone is like a mirror for us to see ourselves. And everyone is like a mindfulness bell that help us come back to tap into these seeds inside ourselves. And these are really our treasures inside. They're the goodness in ourselves. They're the beauties in ourselves. They're the truth in ourselves as well. So I hope by now you learn these different tools and you have a good grasp of these different practices. And what I feel is that what we actually doing this week is really empowering ourselves to cultivate happiness, to cultivate joy, to cultivate well-being, and also to manage our suffering, to manage our difficulties, to embrace our difficulties. And so, understanding is considered a power. Why is it considered a power? Because understanding is like bringing a light. When we are mindful, when we're concentrated, we're actually bringing a light inside our mind, inside our hearts. And this light allows us to see. This light allows us to understand what's happening. And it's through understanding that we can transform it, that we can be free from it. Just like the story for the children, that when we come back to ourselves and we're shedding this light of mindfulness in ourselves, it helps us to see what's happening. It helps us to see the way out of our difficulties. And because understanding is already inside of us, we actually don't need to do much to tap into it. That's the good news. It's part of who we are. It's innate in us. And one of the metaphors that I really like to give us a clear understanding of the power of understanding is the metaphor of a lake or of a pond. So, a pond on a windy day or a rainy day, when you look into it, you see ripples and waves. You don't see much. But on a still and clear day, you look into the pond and you see so deeply into it. You see the bottom of the pond. You see the reflection of the trees and the clouds in the sky in the pond. And so understanding is like that. When we're able to come back to our breath, come back to our breathing, then we see. We have this clarity and this stillness to see really deeply into it. And it's the seeing that helps us to change the situation. But also, understanding brings not just clarity, but it brings love also. Because when we talk about true love cannot be possible if we do not understand. It would be just our ideas and projections, but not exactly true love. Because when we understand, we can't help it but love, but accept and love. Whether it is ourselves, our suffering, or whether it is another person. And also understanding For me, maturity of our mind, or you can say spiritual maturity, comes when there's understanding. So we can use understanding as a gauge to see how mature I am. So if I have high level of understanding, then I can consider myself mature, spiritually mature, mentally mature. So maturity of mind. And understanding also helps to liberate us. It helps us to be free, like I've said. Free from whatever situation that may be unfolding in ourselves. Also from situations that are happening outside as well. Understanding can help us to find a way out of the difficult situation, and it helps us to be free of it. But when we talk about understanding, we have to talk about the different objects of understanding, because understanding has to be understanding of something, right? Just like when we are mindful, we have to be mindful of something. It's not just mindful of nothing, right? Understanding has to be understanding of something. And there are three things that I'd like to talk about this morning. It's our body, our mind, ourselves, we always start with ourselves. We always start with us. Because if you don't understand yourself, you can't love yourself. How are you going to understand other people and love other people? Because deep down, we're very much the same. You know, the kind of suffering we have. And so understanding our mind helps us to understand other people's mind. I think when we're able to read other people's mind, it's because we have read our mind really well. So let's start with the body. It's easy to start with the body. I like to start with the body because it's tangible. The practice of body awareness is very important. Feeling the body. How many of us can feel our body? Raise your hand. Very good, thank you. Because some of us can't feel the body. We're so much in our head that we can't really touch our body. We can't really feel our body. And this is where we need to start. Our healing process is coming back to our body and come in touch with our body and feel the presence of our body. And when we look into our body, we know that there's fear that can come up, you know, in associating with our body. One of those fears that we all have is the fear of getting old, aging. Anybody here who's not afraid of getting old? Some of you are. Pretty good. Good practitioner you are. The other kind of fear that we have regarding to the body is the fear of getting sick. Sickness is another fear. Anybody here who is not afraid of getting sick? And then another fear is the fear of dying. Anybody here who's not afraid of dying? Some of you are not afraid of dying. Pretty good. You must have really powerful understanding to understand the no birth and no death of the body. in order to transform that fear. Well, these are the fear that it's always there when we are facing our body. And some of us get so caught up in it that these fears kind of take over and control our life. And so we need to practice, familiarize ourselves with these fears, befriend with these fears. And so we have these practices to bring up the fear so that we can sit with it. And one of those, they're called the 5 remembrances. I'm of the nature to grow old. I cannot escape old age. And so this is like a meditation we do. Whether we are sitting, whether we're lying down, or when we are coming back and face our body and face the pain in our body, that we can say, I'm of the nature to grow old. I cannot escape old age. And for me, this is about watering seeds. Watering seeds of fearlessness. It's about watering seeds of insight, the seed of insight. Because we start from here in order to go deeper, to see deeper into the nature of our body. Because we're talking about understanding. We need to understand the depths of ourselves so that we can be at peace with ourselves. I'm of the nature to get sick. I cannot escape from sickness. So that when we have back pain or neck tension, shoulder pain, or whatever illness we may have, that we won't freak out because of all this pain. When we are able to accept that I'm of the nature to get sick and I cannot escape from it, then we can stop and look at the pain. We don't need to run, to look for ways to come out of it. We're so good at running. We're so good at not looking at ourselves. We developed really good strategies to distract ourselves from facing these fears inside. And so this meditation is to help us confront these fears. And I'm of the nature to die. I cannot escape death. We're still young and we think that death will never come. Maybe it'll come in 100 years or so. But we know people who are dying at a very early age, right? This morning in the New Hamlet, we send loving meditation to one of our lay Dharma teacher who just passed away a week ago here in France. And I was a bit shocked because the last time I met her was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And she was quite young, maybe in her late 50s. So it comes, right? And when we contemplate on our nature of dying, it's really an opportunity for us to face the fear inside ourselves. And this fear, it's always there. It's always in the back of our mind. It's the motivation, it's the force that affects every aspect of our life. And that all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There's no escape from being separated from them. So I'm not just me who's going to die, but my beloved ones will also die. Sometimes we think, if I die, I can accept that. But when our beloved one dies, that's really difficult to accept. I remember when I was taking care of my mom. It's a funny story. I just told my sister the other day. We were trying to think when we first had the practice of mentor and mentee, and I said, too bad I didn't have my journals anymore. And my sister asked me, what do you do with your journals? Because she knows that I write every day. And I said, I burned them all. And she said, why? So I was telling her this story. I was taking care of my mom. My mom had a stroke, and I was taking care of her. And one night, and it was quite stressful. If you've taken care of someone who's sick, you know how stressful it is. It's really draining. And I was the only one that was taking care of my mom. And one night, I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't breathe. I felt like my body was dying. I was a bit worried about my mom. I thought, who's going to take care of my mom when I die? But then I thought, no worry. I have to let go. If I need to go, I'll go. So I just lie there on my bed and just contemplating death and ready to go. And then all of a sudden, I thought of these boxes of journals that I have written. And it brought up all this fear. Oh my gosh, people will read my journals. So I thought, oh no, I cannot go. I cannot go. So the next day, I was, I took all these journals out and I burned them. Because I thought, okay, if I die, I want to die peacefully. I don't want to die with fear, but with these journals. So that's why I didn't have any journal. And my mom said, even though she wasn't clear anymore, she said, why are you wasting your time writing all these journals? And now you're burning them. So, we think that we can accept our death. Those of you who raise your hand, you think, I can accept my death. I can accept dying. But when someone dies, it's so much harder to accept. Your beloved ones dies, it's so much harder to accept. So, actually, we're not really free from the fear of dying. So this contemplation is really necessary for us, even those of us who think that we're not afraid of dying anymore. And that being separated from a beloved one is quite painful. And I think of, and when my mom passed away, it was quite painful for me, even though I know it's impermanent, and I know we're of the nature to die. And I thought to myself, wow, how fortunate I am, because I can't imagine myself like. I don't know how you handle it, but I think if I have, so I thought if I have a family, if I have a husband, if I have children, and if they're dying, that would be so painful. And I thought, maybe I have went through this so many lifetimes, like having to face the death of someone I love very much. And it gives me such relief to know that in this lifetime, I don't have to go through that anymore. I don't have to go through the suffering and the pain of losing someone that I truly, truly love. And so I've been practicing the separation with Thai. And my mom's death was one that was really difficult, and I know it would be also difficult with Thai, for Thai as well, Thai's death as well. And so it's something that I have to confront and contemplate, being separated from people that I love. But I know separating from Thai is not as bad as separating from like your children, right? No? Or your partner, right? So that's one advantage of being a monastic, I guess. One of the benefits. I don't have to go through that suffering. I've gone through it so many lifetimes. Not this one. And the consequences of my actions, of body, speech, and mind, are my only belongings. And my actions are my continuation. In other words, what continues me are my actions. My actions, bodily action, my speech, and my thinking, my thoughts. So I have to be really mindful of what I produce, what kind of actions I give out, because these are my belongings, these are my continuation. What I give out, if it benefits the world, then I know I have a beautiful continuation. But what I give out that hurts, that harms, it's not a beautiful continuation, and it will continue to hurt and harm me in whatever form that I may take. And so these contemplations help us, I guess, to be more proactive with of how we want to live our life. So let us listen to one sound of the bell first to breathe. When there's mindfulness of the body, when there's acceptance of how our body is, however our body looks or feel, then we can bring healing. We can bring healing and well-being to our body. And healing to our body means healing to our mind. The mind is more difficult to see and more difficult to put our finger into. We can only see our mind with these mind states that we feel and we experience. And a lot of us really don't understand how our mind works. And so we're like always in the dark because we don't understand and we feel like we're in the dark. We can't really come out of suffering that we have. And I'm hearing this a lot in the sharing group, in my sharing group during the summer. How we're just running around in our head, in ourselves, in our mind, because we don't really understand and we don't really see how it works and we don't really know how to deal with it. Any one of us are like that? Or just the young people? I'm with the Wake Up group. Only a few of you. It's pretty good. Good practitioners you are. One of the things that I found really challenging to work with when I go back to myself and look at my mind is my perception. My perceptions. Perceptions are just fabrications of our mind, constructions of the mind. So we construct a reality by conditionings that we have, the experience that's unfolding, our upbringing, like all these experiences that we went through in our life, whether it's a family situation, a family background, education, society, all these factors really affected the way we see the world, because they are elements that help us to construct the world that we see and we experience. What I found it really difficult is that I see these perceptions so real. They're like my reality. How can it be a wrong perception? How can it be otherwise? But the Buddha said 95% our perceptions are wrong. Do we really see that? 95% of our perception is wrong? How many of you actually see that? 95% perception, 95% of your perception is wrong. Pretty good. I don't. I see 95% of my perceptions are right. I do. You ask my sister and they'll tell you. And I found it really difficult because it's really hard to let go of something that I see as my reality. And along with my perceptions or my ideas about things, my notions about things, my self-image. We talked about self-image in our young adult group. And I was reminded of how I was when I was younger. That we had this self-image of ourselves, and when I listened to them, I felt, wow, what distorted self-image they have of themselves. And I think we all have this distorted self-image of ourselves. It's another kind of wrong perception we have about ourselves. We have ideas of what beauty is, of what love is, and what happiness is. And these ideas really prevent us from experiencing the beauty that we are, the love that we have, that's surrounding us, and also the happiness in everything that's unfolding in our life. And I had an eye-opening experience with this. And we need this kind of like crack open, like a self crack open, in order to really get it, to really understand. Otherwise, there are just more ideas in our head about this. When I said that we have ideas about our happiness, about beauty, about love, they may be just, we understand that, We know that. But there may be just more ideas floating in our head, that we need something to crack us open in order to really get it, sink down. And this, it's my relationship with my mom again. I grew up with my mom, and I'm a baby in the family, so all the love is given to me. And I went through my teenage years in the US, and my mom was super caring and overly protective. That's her way to express love. And so she would always, like in the morning before I go to school, she would just sit there and watch me eat breakfast. Or she would, like every day, she would go into my room and remind me to take a shower. Or do I have any laundry, dirty laundry? She'll wash them for me. And she'll cook me like these meals. And growing up as a teenager, I want to break free from that. I felt, first of all, I didn't want to be like a little kid. Second of all, I didn't want to bother her. Like, she's worrying too much about me. And so I had like this irritation that was developing in me towards these behaviors that she had, But of course, I never told her about it. And I was a good girl. So I kept it to myself, and I managed not to, explode at her. And then after high school, I went to college. I went far away from college. And then after 4 years at the university, I came here. I came to Plum Village. So, during the whole time in college, I would visit my mom now and then during the weekends and holidays. And then I came here, and I stayed for a year. And then I decided to become a nun. So I've been away from her since 18. And then one year, the whole Sangha went to California. We went to Deer Park, our center in California, a monastery there. Everyone in Plum Village went, and my mom was there for 3 months. And I was already a nun for a long time. I had a lot of younger sisters and brothers. But when I met my mom again, when I was living with her, she was like caring for me like she cared for me when I was a baby, when I was a child. She would come with like these drinks that she makes for me, and she would ask me if I want her to do, if I want her to do my laundry. And I felt like this discomfort was unfolding again, like this feeling of like, no, just leave me alone. It was unfolding, and I thought, this is not good. I've been a nun for a long time. Why is this coming up again? So I decided I need to get to the bottom of this. So I packed my lunch and I went up to the mountain by myself in Deer Park. There's so many, it's a mountainous area. And we have a large, areas of land, just mountains. And so I went up there by myself because I need to sit with myself and look into like this discomfort that I have with my mom's behavior. And so I spent the whole day there, and I looked in, and what dawned on me was, I have these ideas of what love is and how it should be expressed. How it should be expressed. And how she expressed did not fit these ideas of how love should be. And it was really an eye-opening experience for me. It wasn't coming from here anymore. It was coming from like a gut feeling. It's coming because I made time to look. I made time to breathe. I made time to come back to myself and just be with that discomfort that I was experiencing. And I thought, all this time, I was needing love. And yet I couldn't receive love. So, I know I have these ideas, and these ideas was what prevented me from really experiencing the love that which she was giving me. So I decided that, okay, I need to do something about this. So I went back and I decided that I would just accept and just be happy whatever that she's given me, and just really see them as expressions of love. And there are just so many different expressions of love. Love is expressed in so many different ways. And if we can just come in touch with these different expressions of love, we can be so happy because that's what we need. And yet, I couldn't because of all these ideas that I have, that how love should be expressed for me. And so I was changed in how I was receiving what she was giving me. And that made me happy, but also it made her really, really happy too, because she can see that I had like my resistance down. And so that was like a really eye-opening experience for me. And this is really an invitation for every one of us to examine our ideas of love, our ideas of happiness, and also our ideas of beauty. You know, these young people that were sharing with me, they're so beautiful, and yet they think they're not, and that they're suffering because of it. And they're having like all these kind of like eating disorders and all these kind of things just because they have like these really wrong perceptions about beauty, about them. So it's really an invitation for you to look into this, to look into your ideas about happiness, your ideas about love, and your ideas about beauty. Because you may be suffering unnecessarily. There's certain suffering that's really important, but there are other suffering that's really unnecessary. And if we understand the roots of it, then we can avoid this unnecessary suffering. But where is this actually? I want to look into my perception and my ideas, and I want to understand the roots of it. I mean, there is something deep down that had made me, have these wrong perceptions to begin with, right? So let's let's look at our consciousness. Let's look at our mind. Because when we understand how our mind works, then it's easier to work with ourselves and with our suffering. And so let me just draw something on the board. And some of you have probably heard this so many times before, but I wanted to concentrate on something today. So this is our consciousness. And there are different levels and different functions of consciousness. We know that on the upper level of our consciousness, there are the sense consciousnesses. There's the eye consciousness. There's the ears. There's the nose consciousness. There's the tongue consciousness. There's the body consciousness, and also there's the mind consciousness. So these organs, when the organs come in touch with the object, these two things come together and it produces an awareness, a consciousness. There are deeper levels. These levels of consciousnesses we can actually feel and see and experience. But there are other levels of consciousness which is inaccessible. We cannot have access to it. Here's the deeper level of consciousness. It's called the store consciousness. These consciousnesses, they evolved from the store consciousness. So store consciousness is a consciousness that stores all kinds of seeds. It's a whole spectrum of seeds in here, from most positive to the most negative. So whatever it is that you're looking, they're all in here in ourselves. That's why the practice encourages us to come back to ourselves. The answer to our search, to our questions, are in the depths of our consciousness. They are in here in the store consciousness. The tools we learned here are to help us come back in order to tap into the seeds in our store consciousness. So there's seeds in here. And these have evolved from the store consciousness, but there's one other level of consciousness, one other function of consciousness. It's called the manas. And this is what I want to talk about. Manas also evolves from a seed in the store consciousness. But what manas does is that it springs up and then it goes back down. And then it grabs hold of parts of the store consciousness and it identifies it as itself. So manas, it's responsible for our idea of a self. And this is another thing we need to understand. Because even though we can't have access to manas and to the stored consciousness as we have with the other consciousnesses, but it's a quiet and silent kind of energies that's controlling and dictating and manipulating everything that we do. From the way we think, from how we relate to people, how we relate to the world. So this guy is responsible for it. So manas is it's an ingrained perception of a self, that this is where the idea of a separate self comes from, that we're separate from the people we love, we're separate from other people, we're separate from everything. And so if you are lonely, you know it comes from there. It comes from manas. Manas may be acting out. Manas is also a wrong view of a self. And manas is also responsible for a complex of a self, like inferiority complex, or the superiority complex, or the equality complex. Manas is responsible for it. So manas is ignorant that we are all connected, that everything is affecting us and that we are affecting everything else. And manas has the tendency to avoid suffering. So manas develop these strategies and these defense mechanisms to avoid suffering. So it ignores the goodness of suffering, because we know that suffering is good too, right? Just like the lotus and the mud. Suffering is needed for happiness to be possible. And so just like the mud is needed for lotuses to grow, because without the mud, we wouldn't have lotuses. You cannot grow mud. You cannot grow lotus without the mud. So we know in this beautiful lotus, there's mud inside. And so that's the goodness of suffering, is that when we look into our suffering, when we work with our suffering, we can find happiness. That's where happiness comes from. And yet manas rejects that. Manas is just busy running away from suffering and not making use of suffering to grow, to grow, to grow happiness, to grow lotuses. And manas seeks pleasures regardless of consequences. That sounds familiar, right? We eat a lot of chocolate just because there's a craving, or just because we want to avoid feeling certain thing inside. I have the kids been coming up to me to ask for Lazy Day chocolate. And you know what Lazy Day chocolate is? Well, so I decided that only during Lazy Day that I treat myself with chocolate. So every Lazy Day I would give myself a piece of chocolate so that I wouldn't get carried away, like with this craving for chocolate. So I gave them, I was sharing with them like this chocolate, and so they would just run up to me and say, "Can we have Lazy Day chocolate?" Even if it's not a lazy day, they'll come up to me and say, "Lazy Day chocolate, sister." And so we don't see the dangers and the negative consequences of seeking pleasures, because We just want to satisfy this idea of a self, sort of like an ego, you know? You just want to feed that ego. You want to just feed that self. And he doesn't see the danger of pleasure seeking. Because seeking pleasure, like eating too much chocolate, can make you sick. And manas cannot see that. It's like an endless, sort of like an endless and bottomless container that you put in and you can never feel satisfied. And so we run all over just to fill in, whether it's our happiness, whether it's money, whether it's whatever it is that we're running after, that you're running after, and we could never feel satisfied because it's bottomless. And manas ignores the law of moderation. It doesn't know when to stop. Whatever it is, whatever craving it is that we have, manas just said more and more and more. That sounds like a 2-year-old child, isn't it? And when I think of manas, I think of like our inner child. We all have an inner child in us, and a lot of us have a wounded inner child. And I think this is where the inner child is. Manas is where the inner child is. You know, that the suffering that we have, the craving that we have, the wrong perceptions that we have about ourselves. And manas is afraid of dying. It's afraid of hunger. It's afraid of loneliness. Manas is responsible for the original fear. We talked about the original fear. And this is where it comes from. It doesn't see that. It doesn't see the dangers in these fears. Because these fears really prevent us from appreciating whatever we have. You know, we're talking about looking into our body and confronting the fear. And this fear made us, it makes us suffer, and that we have to find ways to avoid feeling it. So we go into, you know, we create strategies that are so unhealthy and unwholesome, so that we don't have to feel our suffering, so that we don't have to feel, you know, to face the fear of dying, of hunger, of being lonely, of being abandoned. And manas doesn't see that the environment as ourselves. It sees that the environment is different from itself. And so I think this is what happened with our world right now, with the climate change, is that we don't really see that this environment is us, the earth is us, and that destroying the environment is destroying ourselves. So manas does not see that. So what can we do now that we know manas is there and manas is responsible for these destructive behaviors that we have, for unhealthy strategies that we've built. One of the practice that we learned is the practice of mere recognition. Mere recognition, or simple recognition, which means that whatever that's unfolding in ourselves, whether it's the feeling of loneliness, sadness, whether it's a craving for chocolate, craving for something, like I just need to eat something. I don't know what it is, but I just need to eat something. It might be a deeper craving, maybe masking, this craving for chocolate. What we do as a practice of mere recognition is that we sit there and we feel the rawness of that experience. How painful it might be, how uncomfortable it might be. Feel the discomfort of it. Feel the texture of it. I'm saying feel and not think, because we don't want to think about it. The thinking takes us away from the experience. But we feel it for what it is. And we avoid having these ideas in our head about it, whether it's judgment, self-judgment, or whether it's blaming, putting ourselves down, beating ourselves down. That we avoid all these, but just feeling it for what it is. It's like bringing that light of mindfulness in again and shining it onto this experience that we have. Just like what the children have learned today. Just to be still and to feel and to look. And the breathing is really instrumental in helping us to be grounded in the present moment. And that's the practice of recognition. That practice is enough to really change the situation. We bring in the light in order for us to understand what it is. When we bring this light in, we can see. We can see the depths, the causes and conditions, the roots of these issues that's unfolding in ourselves. And we can accept. We can accept it. Because we understand it, then we can accept it. Manas, when we practice like that, the practice of mere recognition, whenever it comes up, we recognize it and breathe with it. What happens is that manas starts to shifts, and manas starts to change. And the more light of mindfulness we bring in, it changes inside. But another thing that we can practice in order to bring light in is to educate manas by downloading these insights of interbeing, how we are connected to everything, the insight of non-self, that we cannot be separate, we can only inter-are with everything there is. In other words, when we look into ourselves, we see that we cannot exist by ourselves alone, that we need other people, we need other elements to help us to live, to survive, to exist, right? And we can also download impermanence. In other words, these practices of contemplation helps to educate manas. We bring insight in and help to educate manas of the nature of interbeing, of the nature of impermanence, of the nature of non-self. And these are something that we can practice in our daily life. They're not something out of reach. Like when we breathe, we can actually see the non-self of this breath. See the impermanence of this breath, like this breath that comes in. It dies, right? Because it stops, it becomes the out-breath. So when you say that your in-breath dies, that means that it's no longer the in-breath. It's not just the in-breath all the time. It becomes the out-breath. And think of all the air that you're breathing right now, maybe the air that I'm breathing in. So if you contemplate deeply on the breath, you can actually see the non-self of the breath. You can actually experience interbeing. And these are the kind of insights that we need to download into manas so that manas can crack open. Because when it cracks open, what happens is that it becomes a wisdom. It's called wisdom of non-discrimination. And this is the deepest wisdom that we can experience. And this is when we can experience the interconnectedness between ourselves and everyone and everything. And it's not coming from our head, our intellect anymore. It comes from like real gut feeling experience. And we know this is an insight and not just an intellectual idea. And the fear of death is also coming from manas. And like I said, this fear it's one that's governed by every other kind of fear we have. And so when we practice with the body and see that we have the nature to die, we cannot escape death, then we can begin to go in and look at this fear of dying. And we know that it's a wrong perception that stemmed from manas. And when we look at a cloud, we know that the cloud does not die, right? Thai has a calligraphy that says a cloud never dies. It can only transform into different forms, but it can never die. It can either turn into water, vapor, or snow, but it can never die. It transforms so that it can come back again as a cloud. And it's the same thing with us. We can never die. We can only transform into different forms, but we can never die. And one of those forms for you who are having children is that you see your continuation so clearly in your children. That's one of the forms that you are manifesting. And I see when the parents bring their children here, I could see the resemblance of the children with the parents so much, not just physically, but in their demeanor also. So that's your continuation. Take good care of your continuation, because she or he continues into the future. So the fear of death, I have, like I shared, I've been practicing for a long time, practicing dying. it was also motivated during the time that I had this like eye-opening experience with my mom, how I was needing love and couldn't recognize love because of these ideas, and I thought, well, I need to prepare for her death because I know it would be really painful. Because one time I had a dream that she was dying, and I lost my voice completely. I couldn't cry, I couldn't say anything because I was filled with like grief and emotion. And so I thought I had to prepare for this. And the other person I have to prepare for was Thai. I mean, these are two people that are really important for me and people that I love very much, and I need to be able to have calmness when they die. So one of those practices that I did was, I practice like every time I lie down, I just imagine that this may be my last, and that I'm dying. So that's one of the practices that I do. Like allow my body to sink into the bed, like my body deteriorating. But also when I have like something that comes up, like a suffering that comes up, then I visualize that experience dying with like the dying cells in my body, because my body, the cells in my body are dying every moment. And I'm allowing this, like this suffering that I have to die with these cells so that it can just melt away. And so I don't need to like hold on to it. Sometimes we like the experience of suffering. We can't let go of our suffering, right? So that we can really smile and can really experience joy. Because sometimes some of us identify with this suffering so much. That's who we are. Like it's part of our self-image, like the suffering we have. So I practice allowing this, the suffering to die with the dying cell. So I visualize these cells in my body, the suffering contains in these cells are dying, and they're dying with these dying cells. And Thai encourages us to find different ways to practice dying so that we can come in terms with death, so that we can see beyond death and see the non-self, the non-dying of our body, of our mind. And when we contemplate on a cloud, it's an opportunity for us to understand our nature as well. So next time, when this inner child surfaces, it's actually good news. Don't feel despaired, because it's actually an opportunity for us to take care of it, to embrace it, and to transform it. And it all starts with these simple things that we do in our daily life. It starts with conscious breathing, mindful steps. These are ways to go in. Awareness of the body, feeling the body. These are different ways to go in. And we are encouraged to create more Dharma doors Thai had created a lot of Dharma doors for us to practice. One of those Dharma doors is the bell, actually, because in other tradition, when you hear the bell, it doesn't have the same effect as ours here. But here, when you hear the sound of the bell, everyone stops and everyone comes back to ourselves, to our breath, to our body. So when we can create these different Dharma doors to help us to come back and tap into the energy of mindfulness, to bring the light of mindfulness in, so that we can understand, we can see. And so this week, when the brother Phap Yung talked about the power of cutting off or cutting through afflictions, or the power of love, these two powers depend very much on the power of understanding, because it is with understanding that we can cut through, and it is with understanding that we can truly love. So this week you've been empowered with these energies, and you've learned the different tools to generate these powers in yourself. And we wish that you will be able to continue making use of these tools to empower yourself, so that your life is changed to be more conscious, happier, more peaceful, and so that our life becomes beneficial for our beloved ones, but also beneficial for the world. Because our presence, our peace, our love, our understanding affects the whole world. It's energy, it's not something that stays in this body. Energy is something that transcends space and time. And when we can generate these powerful energies in us, it can actually vibrate and ripple out and affects the whole humanity. So thank you so much for being part of this awakening experience. And it's our contribution to the collective awakening of the earth, of humanity.